Michael McKee and I have a mutual agreement that usually the secretary says nothing. What's the backstory? I'm not going to get it from Secretary Mnuchin. I'm going to get it from Michael McKee. What's the backstory on this trip?
Well, the backstory is that the president has now backed himself into a corner. He said, we're going to put on sanctions. The Chinese have threatened to retaliate, so they got to find some way out of it, unless you really want a trade war, and that's always a possibility with this administration. So they're going over to China to try to negotiate something. The Chinese have suggested that they're willing to negotiate, but only so far. The question is, what will satisfy the administration? The Chinese have, as our reporting has shown, suggested that they would be willing to increase their purchases of a number of American products like airliners that would help bring down the trade deficit a little bit, but they're not going to abandon their plans to be a strategic leader in the industries of tomorrow, which is something that Donald Trump has suggested maybe they need to do.
Is Mr. Ross and/or Mr. Navarro on this junket?
Mr. Navarro is on the junket. Mr. Ross has been somewhat sidelined. It is, as Chris Kruger of Cowen and Company says, the bar scene from Star Wars in terms of the people that they have gathered together, because it is Mnuchin and Lighthizer who don't see eye to eye.
This is critical, Francine.
Well.
Mike perfectly describes this, except the Chinese don't play bar scenes from Star Wars, do they?
Well, the question that was asked is, are they going to be negotiating among themselves more than they are with the Chinese? Because they certainly don't all agree on what U.S. trade policy should be.
Right, but Michael, two questions. First of all, do the tariffs and trade sanctions from the U.S. actually have any teeth if everyone is exempt apart from the Chinese? And two, the fact that we saw huge, leadership change in China with the president effectively there for a much longer time, does it mean that he can deal with the U.S. in a much cooler, level-headed way?
Well, certainly Xi Jinping can deal with the U.S. in the way he would like to, and he does have a plan, this Made in China 2025, that they want to stick to. But he can also negotiate and make some concessions that in other countries might not be as easy to do. So he does have a bit more of a free hand than perhaps a normal politician would. Now, the sanctions on the Chinese are different from the steel and aluminum sanctions. We have sanctions on those products from China and have had for a long time. The extent that was granted last night is to other countries. It really isn't going to affect China all that much, but it will perhaps affect the European Union quite a bit if they can't reach some sort of agreement.